Totalitarian and authoritarian governments commonly apply censorship to achieve a better control over the minds of their subjects. They can decide what information to feed to the population. In this way, these regimes can wield a better grasp over the minds of the people, which helps them solidify their power. The control over the output of cinema is considered as having an integral part in achieving this mastery over the thoughts of people. This is due to its vivid nature and ability to visually convey ideas and messages. In our project, we would like to take a closer look at 4 films from Bulgaria, Greece, Yugoslavia, and Romania. We're going to investigate how they were influenced by the impositions of censorship in their respective countries and how they attempted to circumvent these restrictions.
We will start off by looking at the Bulgarian cinema productions. Being under the communist regime from 1946 to 1990, it was highly influenced by the Soviet Union. Bulgarian cinematography has produced some excellent films that portray the harsh reality under communism and raise some valuable points. The state was involved from the first moment a movie production started. The conditions were such that the cinematographers had limited freedom of what they could show to the public. Even if some productions managed to go unnoticed through the process and reach the stage of screening, there are many examples of films being afterwards banned because of the way they challenged and ridiculed the regime. A movie that received a harsh ban from the state was Binka Zhelyaskova's The Tied Up Balloon. The 1967 film is set during World War II and tells the story of a barrage balloon appearing out of nowhere over a small Bulgarian village and startling its inhabitants. This unusual sight causes fear in some and excitement in others. The tied-up balloon premiered to the public but was immediately banned after that by the state. The government stated that it was offensive and insulting to the communist regime. Even the fact that the balloon comes from Romania, passes the border and floats over the Bulgarian village made it an unacceptable influence by an outsider. Once the balloon appears and the villagers start pursuing it, there is no more strict order. They sing and dance and have fun while on their mission. The communist regime saw that as a sign of insubordination, and this was one more reason to put this strict ban on the movie. In reality, the film portrayed the very real life under the Soviet rule and the struggles of the people in the village. With this satirical drama, Zhelyaskova also implied the origin of many of the communist leaders. The ban lasted for 23 years, and it was not long after the regime collapsed that it was lifted and the tied-up balloon was considered a masterpiece in the Bulgarian cinematography, proving that the harsh ban from the state was uncalled for.
The regime affected not only Bulgaria, but its neighbors as well. With the dawn of the communist era, the Romanian film industry was nationalized, therefore leading to mass-produced cinema with skilled actors and directors. With the vast growth of production, the golden age of Romanian film industry was born. That being said, like many other things during communism, this golden age of cinema was crippled by the lack of freedom that the regime provided. During the 1960s, the movie theaters did not screen movies to the taste of the public, but that to the social ideology. Most films were not intended to be a form of entertainment, but an instrument for propaganda to the masses. Thus, the original meaning were often twisted in a way to fit the official ideology. One of the very little movies managing to slip through the curtains was the movie Reconstructea from Lucian Pintili, who is of the first film directors to oppose the regime. Inspired by the French New Wave, he had the motivation and courage to create a realistic view of Ceausescu's regime in 1968. To sum it up, 2 young men were caught fighting in a bar. For their act, they are forcefully taken and later convinced to reenact this scene as an educational purpose, showing the downsides of alcohol. During the filming, Pintilli showed social realism through the cruelty of communist authorities and adding a pinch of humor here and there. Motivated by his digest, he shows the invasive practices of the party, who threatens the 2 young men with jail time if not taking part in the propaganda. Further illustrated is a policeman who commands throughout the whole movie. As a result, Lucian Pintilli was banned as a Romanian film director for more than 10 years. Reconstructea was banned for 2 weeks after its first screening in 1968, having barely any people hearing about it. Like many other things, it was reintroduced shortly after the fall of communism in 1990. Despite his long-lasting ban, Pintilli returned and made several other movies, one of which, Carnival Scenes, banned again for showing the low suburban class of communism as poor, contradicting with the regime. Having that in mind, he remains one of the very best Romanian film directors.
In contrast with other Balkan states like Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia, Greece has never had a communist regime in charge of the country. The military coup in 1967 has established a dictatorial regime in the state. Greeks had been deprived of the democratic form of leadership and were put under the oppressive hegemony of the colonials. The government had deprived people from the freedom of assembly, freedom of thought, and freedom of press. The Greek cinema was affected by the military dictatorship as well. Censorship did not stop everyone from creating works of art that aim to inspire and voice opinion over controversial topics. This is the case with the film Zeta, directed by the Greek expatriate Kostas Gavras. After its release in 1969, screening in Greece was immediately banned, because it openly criticized the military regime and exposed its anti-ethical approaches of controlling Greeks' mindset. Based on a true story, Zeta shows how the military regime unscrupulously eliminated all its enemies. The film depicted the assassination of the leftist Greek politician Grigorios Lambrakis and all the preceding actions that came during the investigation and the prosecution of those who were guilty of the crime. The aim of Kostas Gavras was to openly criticize the military junta. He wanted to expose every decision that they make which was hidden from the public. The director did exactly the opposite of idolizing the army, which was the topic of most of the propaganda movies in Greece for that period. However, Zeta was not a propaganda film. It was more of an emotional film which depicted the morality behind the power struggle. It showed that human rights were in danger and may even be non-existent in Greece. What the film also does very well is to unleash the anger that has been deeply rooted in the hearts of the oppressed Greeks. This is particularly true for the last part where, despite all the evidence against the colonials, the ones who were guilty received minimal punishment. This exacerbates the fear of the Greeks that the regime was invincible. Like many other directors who were trying to convey a political message against the regime, Kostas Gavras tried to hide the fact that the movie was addressed to the Greek auditorium. The whole movie was shot in Algeria and featured French actors who also spoke in French. However, this was not enough and the film was eventually banned in Greece. As the opening credits of the film state, any resemblance of real events and persons living or dead is not accidental, it's deliberate. This outlines that Zeta was very explicitly portraying a specific event which was easily recognized by the Greek censorship.
Our police? Who will redirect our directives and who release our release? Who will police our judges and who will our will?
The 1970s were also a particularly turbulent times in the Socialist Federation Republic of Yugoslavia, a period interwoven with political and social reforms. The imposed restrictions of President Josip Broz Tito on the creative literature and film work that was produced impacted heavily the freedom of artistic expression. Yet, backlash of film directors in specific persisted. The emergence of partisan black wave in the late 60s served as a colloquial label in mockery and an anti-regime film vessel of critique. The often satirical and at times overly explicit cinematic productions have been deemed staining of the political regime's propagandist agenda. Truly, the banning of films in Yugoslavia was tendacious and repressive. Dusan Makaviev's W.R. Mysteries of the Organism, a film blending communist politics with sexuality, was a pinpoint example. The film follows an unconventional narrative structure, mixing fictional, documentary, and biographical story elements of Wilhelm Reich, an early 20th century Austrian-American psychologist viewed by many as mentally ill. Makaviev attempts to capture the freedom of self-expression by young communists, the sexual revolution, and the ideology of Reich for the power of cosmic biological energy. Makaviev's film is not really a sex film, but is certainly a film about sex, sexual repression, and free love as a true expression of communism. Upon its initial screenings in 1971, both in and out of Yugoslavia, WR Mysteries of the Organism was banned in for the next 16 years, classified as politically offensive and further as a hard porn. Makavev was later indicted of charges of treason towards the state, its agencies, and representatives. Following this film, however, a great deal of things changed in the film industry of Yugoslavia. Scenes of lovemaking were screened more often, added to filmmakers' liberated creative freedom in cinematography, albeit proportionally to censors' control and sensibility of political power centers. Any hint of carrying interpretations of the system ideologies and the class and national power continued to be reprimanded harshly.
Having structures and systems in place that enforce censorship certainly stifles the free flow of information and ideas. However, this practice can also have an unexpected positive side effect. Artists can become stimulated to devise ways of circling around such restrictions. Hence, the result can be more metaphoric movies, which stir the audience to actively interpret the material they are being shown, versus spectators being passively fed whatever the government wishes them to know. Therefore, restrictive regimes unwittingly stimulate dissident thought by the very limitations devised to uphold order.
Bye.